My new director slid my application across the boardroom table like it was an afterthought, barely glancing up from his phone. 22 years of keeping Clearwater Logistics running. 22 years of 6 a.m. starts and missed hockey games and weekends answering emails nobody else understood, and he dismissed it in about 4 minutes flat. "I appreciate everything you bring to the team," he said, adjusting his cufflinks. He'd been in the country 8 months. "But after careful consideration, we feel you're not quite the right fit for the VP operations role. We need someone with a more contemporary approach to organizational leadership." Contemporary approach. I kept my face neutral. The kind of neutral you learn when you've been driving long haul through northern Ontario in January, when the highway disappears and panic gets you killed. You just breathe and you keep going. "Thank you for letting me know," I said. He was already looking back at his phone. "My name is Gordon Marsh. I'm 53 years old, and for most of my adult life, I was the person Clearwater Logistics called when something was about to go sideways. Not the face of the company, not the guy in the press releases, the guy who knew where every file lived, who every client actually trusted, who could look at a shipping manifest and tell you in 30 seconds where the delay was going to happen before it happened. I'd been doing that since I was 31, when I joined as a regional coordinator and spent the first 2 years rebuilding a client retention system that the previous team had let collapse entirely. I'd come to Clearwater after my marriage ended. Sophie had taken the kids to her mother's place in Sudbury while I figured out what I was doing with my life. My daughter Megan was 7, my son Kyle was 4, and I needed stability more than I needed ambition. Clearwater gave me that. A base salary, benefits, a pension I could actually count on, and work that made sense to me. Logistics is like a long math problem. There's always a right answer, you just have to find it. Over the years, I rebuilt my relationship with both kids, drove up to Sudbury every other weekend, made it to every school concert and baseball game I could manage. Megan was in university now studying environmental science. Kyle was in his last year of high school, talking about trades, which I respected more than I probably let on. The VP promotion would have meant real money, enough to pay off the last of the support arrears I'd been chipping away at for a decade, and still put something away for Megan's grad school. That promotion was supposed to be the finish line. The morning after the meeting, I sat in my car in the Clearwater parking lot on Confederation Drive for a long time. The October rain was hitting the windshield. I thought about the 22 years. I thought about the Hendricks account, which I'd personally saved by flying to Calgary on a Sunday and spending 14 hours in their warehouse, fixing a routing error nobody else could find. I thought about the Beaumont contract, worth $4.2 million annually, where I was still the only person the client's operations lead would speak to directly. I thought about the 3 times I'd trained my own replacement. People who'd been promoted around me while I stayed in the same chair and kept everything from falling apart. And then I thought about something my father used to say, back when he was working the floor at the GM plant in Oshawa. "Gordon, they'll take everything you give them and then ask for more. The only person keeping score is you." I walked in at 8:30. My contract specified core hours. I had a contract. I went straight to my desk. For the first time in 22 years, I did not check the overnight freight reports. I did not call the Vancouver terminal to see if the Beaumont shipment had cleared customs. I did not review the backlog from the Manitoba run, which typically threw up 2 or 3 issues that would become small fires by noon if you didn't catch them early. I opened my task list, identified the 3 items that were explicitly my responsibility, and I started working through them in order. By 10 o'clock, my colleague from the Alberta accounts came by looking mildly panicked. "Gordon, the Beaumont shipment. Customs held it in Vancouver. Their guy is calling every half hour." I looked up from the compliance filing I was reviewing. "Did you put in a service ticket?" "What?" "The customs delay. The procedure is to file a service ticket through the client portal, which triggers the escalation protocol to the trade compliance team. It's in the operations manual. Section 4, subsection B. He stared at me. In 22 years, he had never heard me say the words operations manual out loud. I always just fix things. But you always handle Beaumont directly. I've been encouraged to focus on my core responsibilities, I said, and I turned back to my screen. By 2 o'clock, the trade compliance team had touched the Beaumont file exactly once, decided they didn't have enough context, and parked it. The client's operations lead had now left 4 voicemails, 2 for me, 1 for my director, 1 for the main office line. My director appeared at my desk at 2:15. He was a tall man, mid-40s, always looked like he'd just come from a conference. Nice suit, good hair, the kind of person who was very comfortable in a room full of PowerPoint slides and very lost in front of an actual problem. Gordon, Beaumont's been calling. They're saying there's a customs issue. Yes, I said. I understand a service ticket was filed this morning. That's not how we handle Beaumont. You handle Beaumont personally. I was under the impression I needed to work within the standard escalation protocols, I said, keeping my voice entirely pleasant, to demonstrate the kind of organizational awareness that's expected at the VP level. A pause. A long one. Can you call them? I have the year-end compliance audit due to Transport Canada by 4 o'clock, I said. It's a regulatory deadline. I can't miss it. He walked away without answering. I watched him go, and then I turned back to the compliance audit, which I had in fact been working on for 2 weeks, and was completely f***ed. I just had a few final checks to run. At 4:30, I packed up my bag and left. I drove to Kyle's school to watch the last 40 minutes of his shop class presentation. He was showing the instructor a table he'd built, solid oak, dovetail joints, the kind of craftsmanship that takes actual patience. He looked surprised to see me standing in the doorway. Dad, everything okay? Just left on time for once, I said. He grinned. It was the first time I'd seen that particular grin in a while. On the drive home, I checked my work phone at a red light. 14 missed calls. 3 from Beaumont's operations lead, 1 from my director, 1 from someone in the Calgary office, and, this one surprised me, 2 from the CEO's executive assistant. I put the phone face down on the passenger seat and kept driving. The next morning, the office had a different quality to it when I walked in at 8:30. Harder to define. Like the air pressure had changed slightly. 2 people were clustered around the Beaumont file on a shared screen, looking frustrated. My director's office light was on, and he was on the phone, standing up, which he never did. The Manitoba situation had also, apparently, developed overnight into something that required a 3-way call with the carrier and the client that nobody in the office knew how to set up because I was the one who always set those up. I settled at my desk and opened the regulatory correspondence I'd been meaning to file with CTA since Tuesday. My director appeared at 9:45. Gordon, we need you in the boardroom. I looked at my calendar. I have the CTA correspondence due this morning. This is more urgent. The CTA filing has a statutory deadline, I said. I can join the boardroom meeting at 11:15 if you'd like to schedule it then. He looked at me for a moment with an expression I couldn't entirely read, something between frustration and the early stages of understanding. 11:15, he said finally, and left. I filed the CTA correspondence at 10:50. At 11:15, I walked into the boardroom. It wasn't just my director. The CEO, Arlene Bosch, was there. She'd been with Clearwater for 15 years, built the national network from a regional carrier, the kind of executive who got to work before her assistant. And on the screen at the end of the room, Beaumont's operations VP was waiting. His name was Gerald Fontaine. We'd worked together for 9 years. He had the look of a man who had not slept. Gordon, Arlene said when I came in. The relief in her voice was immediate and very clear. What's the current status on the Vancouver hold? I asked, sitting down and opening my notebook. Gerald leaned forward on the screen. 3 pallets flagged for a classification issue. The customs broker is saying it's a paperwork discrepancy on the country of origin documentation, but nobody at Clearwater seems to have access to the original manifests. I have them, I said. I archived the full Beaumont trade documentation going back to 2019 when we restructured the filing system. The discrepancy will be in the HS code on the 3rd pallet. We had a similar issue in February 2022, and the resolution is documented. I pulled up the folder on my laptop and shared my screen. Here's the broker letter from that resolution. Same commodity, same classification question. CBSA accepted this supporting documentation. Gerald looked at his own screen. That's exactly it. Gordon, can you send that directly to our broker? Already done, I said. The meeting ended in 25 minutes. Gerald signed off with a "This is why we stay with Clearwater" that landed in the room like a small grenade. Arlene asked my director to give us a moment. He left without making eye contact with either of us. Arlene closed the door. She was a compact woman, late 50s, the kind of person who didn't waste words or expressions. She sat across from me and folded her hands on the table. "How long has this been building?" she asked. 22 years, I said, but specifically, about 5 months since the new leadership structure came in. She was quiet for a moment. "The VP decision." "Yes. Tell me what you think you bring that wasn't recognized." In the old days, I would have deflected. I would have said something modest and let her draw her own conclusions. But I was 53 years old, and I had run out of patience for performing smallness. "I built the Beaumont relationship from a cold introduction in 2015, I said. "I restructured the Ontario-Manitoba corridor in 2019 when we were hemorrhaging clients, and I did it over one weekend because nobody else knew the system well enough to touch it. I wrote the operations manual that every new hire in this office is trained on, and I've trained 7 people in the last decade who were all promoted ahead of me while I was told I needed more organizational visibility." Arlene looked at me steadily. "Why did you stay?" "Because I believed eventually it would be recognized," I said. "And because the work mattered to me, and because I have kids and stability mattered more than ambition for a long time. And now? I've had a call from a freight brokerage in Burlington," I said. "They're building a national operations division. They've asked me to consider a senior director role." She didn't flinch. "When do they need an answer?" "End of month." Arlene sat back in her chair and looked at the table for a moment. I'd known her for 15 years, and I'd never seen her actually look tired before. "Gordon, I owe you a direct conversation, and I should have had it before now." She paused. "The VP decision was made by the incoming leadership team. I signed off on it because I trusted the process. That was a mistake on my part. I didn't say anything." "What would it take to keep you here?" "Recognition of what I actually do," I said, "not just when there's a crisis. A title and compensation that reflect it, and the authority to actually fix the structural problems instead of just patching them every time they break." She nodded slowly. "I want to propose something. A new position, head of national operations, reporting to me directly, base salary of $168,000 with a performance structure on top. Full mandate to rebuild the operations framework the way you see fit." She met my eyes. "That's not a counteroffer. That's what the role is worth." The number landed quietly. It was more than the Burlington offer. It was more than I had imagined asking for. It was enough to clear the last of what I owed, put something real aside for Megan's grad school, and still live like a person who occasionally sleeps. But I didn't answer immediately. "I need a few days," I said. "Take until Monday," she said. "But I need you to know, if you go to Burlington, we lose Beaumont, and Beaumont is the anchor that holds 4 other contracts in place. I'm not saying that to pressure you. I'm saying it so you understand what you've actually built here." I appreciated that she said it plainly. That was the thing about Arlene. She didn't dress things up. On my way back to my desk, my director stepped out of his office and asked if he could speak with me. I told him I had 15 minutes. He closed the door and looked out the window for a moment before turning around. He was a smart person. I'd always known that. He just had a particular kind of intelligence that worked very well in certain rooms and very badly in the actual world. "I heard what happened in the boardroom," he said. "All right, I need to say something." He paused. "When I said you weren't the right fit, what I meant, or what I thought I meant, was that the VP role required someone who was more visible externally, more of a presence in industry circles. You've been the engine room, not the bridge. I know that's how you saw it," I said. "Is that wrong?" I thought about it genuinely. "It's not entirely wrong," I said. "But the assumption underneath it is that those are fixed categories, that the person keeping everything running can't also be the person with the vision, that someone who spent 20 years learning a business from the inside has less strategic value than someone who spent it going to the right conferences." I paused. "I let you think I was one thing because it was easier. That was partly my own doing." He was quiet for a while. If you stay, I haven't decided yet. If you stay, he said, I'd like to do this differently. I looked at him. He meant it, I thought. People generally do, in these moments. Whether it lasts is a different question. We'll see, I said. That weekend, Megan drove down from Kingston to have dinner. She was in her final year, working on a thesis about wetland restoration in the Canadian Shield, the kind of work that made you feel like the next generation might actually sort some things out. We made pasta in my kitchen, and she told me about her research while the news played quietly in the other room. You seem different, she said, winding pasta around her fork. Different how? Less compressed, she said. Like you've been carrying something for a long time and you put it down. Something like that. Kyle told me you showed up to the shop class thing. I did, she smiled. He talked about it for 2 days, Dad. I didn't say anything for a moment. There's a particular kind of regret that doesn't announce itself. It just sits in the background of everything for years, quiet and patient. I'd been a decent father by most measures. Present enough. Financially there when it mattered. But there's present and then there's actually there, and I knew the difference. Your mother called last week, I said. I know. She told me. Megan looked at me carefully. Are you going to take the promotion? I'm thinking about it. What's the other option? Burlington, I said. New start. No history. She thought about this seriously, the way she'd always thought about things, taking her time, not performing an answer. The history is the thing they need, though, isn't it? She said. It wasn't really a question. Leaving doesn't change what happened. It just means someone else gets the benefit of what you know. I looked at her across the kitchen table and thought about how much she'd grown into someone I genuinely admired. When did you get so clear-headed? I asked. I had a good teacher, she said. Eventually. Monday morning, I arrived at 7:15. My choice. Not because I had to. I went to Arlene's office before she'd taken her coat off. I accept, I said. One condition, she looked up. I'm listening. I want to build a formal advancement structure for the operations team. Clear criteria, documented pathways. No more of the informal, we'll revisit this conversations that go nowhere. People who do the work should be able to see the road ahead. Arlene looked at me for a moment and then nodded. Draft the framework and bring it to me in 2 weeks. If it's solid, it goes company-wide. It'll be solid. She smiled, a small one but real. I know it will. 3 months later, the Manitoba corridor was running at its best efficiency in 7 years. We'd brought in 2 people from regional offices who'd been underutilized, and together we'd rebuilt the scheduling system from the ground up. Beaumont expanded their contract to include the Atlantic region. Gerald Fontaine personally sent Arlene a letter noting that the operational improvements had made Clearwater the most reliable carrier they'd worked with in 15 years. My director and I found a rhythm. He was genuinely good at the external relationships, the conference circuit, the industry positioning. Things I had no interest in and no patience for. We stopped working around each other and started working with each other, which turned out to make both our jobs significantly better. In January, I picked Kyle up from his first day at the Trades College in Barrie. He'd got into the millwright program, exactly what he'd wanted. On the drive back, he was quiet in that satisfied way that meant things had gone well. How was it? I asked. Good, he said. Really good, actually. He looked out the window at the highway. Dad, can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you stay at Clearwater? After everything. I thought about it for a while, watching the 400 unspool ahead of us in the early dark. Because leaving would have been the easy answer, I said. And I've spent enough of my life taking the easy answer. He nodded slowly. That makes sense. The harder thing, I said, was staying and making them see it. Making the place actually better, instead of just taking what I knew somewhere else and starting over. Kyle was quiet for a moment. Mom always said you were stubborn. Your mother wasn't wrong. He laughed. A real one, easy and unguarded. I hadn't heard that sound enough over the years, and I intended to hear it more. There's something they don't tell you about being the person who holds everything together. They don't tell you that one day you'll have to decide whether to keep doing it on someone else's terms or to finally insist on your own. They also don't tell you that the answer to that question will say more about who you are than 20 years of keeping the lights on ever did. I decided to stay, but I came back as myself this time. That turned out to make all the difference.